Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my second episode of my series where I'm watching all of the movies featured in Best Movie Year Ever by Brian Rafferty. We are now on the second movie in that book, which is Following by Christopher Nolan. Ended up watching this on archive.org. It was on there, so I watched it there. It's also available on Amazon to rent. Watch it on archive.org. It's filmed, I think it was filmed in 16 millimeter. It's presented in a 4 by 3 aspect ratio. So at full screen, it's like a square. But black and white, set in London. And it's about, I think the character's name was just the follower, or like they call him, I think he calls himself Bill at one point. His whole thing is that he's a writer, and again, we're going to be getting into spoilers with this. Spoilers with this video. He's a writer, and he follows people around London, kind of just following them around to get ideas for like for various things he wants to write. Let me bring my notes out here. So again, black and white, 4 by 3 aspect ratio, follows people, and then eventually the main thing is he ends up breaking some of his rules for following people. Like, he doesn't not supposed to follow the same person more than once. He's not supposed to follow people into like dark alleys and things like that. So he has a few rules that he is supposed to use when he's following people. Eventually breaks one of those rules, which is not to follow the same person, I think, more than once. He's sitting in a diner. I'm eating like some lunch and getting some coffee when the guy walks up to him, basically says, I know you're following me, and that guy ends up being a professional thief. So let's see. Yeah, rules for following. Let's see. Usually, table. The guy's got a stolen bag of CDs that he's basically like trying to fence off, and things like that. He starts following this guy. Even this guy basically kind of invites him to start doing robberies with him. And these are not traditional robberies. They'll break into like an apartment, and sometimes they'll take stuff. Sometimes they'll just rearrange things. The thief has like a thing like that everybody has, what he calls a box, where you have just little things in there that like are kind of generally innocuous, but they might have sentimental value to the person that has them. And he breaks one of those open, dumps it out, kind of just as a way to kind of announce that he's been there. He kind of likes going in and just messing with stuff and kind of like putting their life on display, makes them kind of reevaluate their life. That's kind of like his logic and whatnot. So he leaves these things to be seen. They actually do get caught on their very first robbery. They basically kind of play it off like they were people from like a real estate agency. I think it was like a real estate company looking to rent out their apartment, and people were like, well, we're not trying to, we're not planning on moving. They kind of go out and stuff like that. He meets a woman at a bar, and they basically kind of, she's dating the bar's owner. One thing I should say about this film is the narrative is just like other Christopher Nolan films, takes place kind of not in order. So there's stuff that you will see that happens earlier in the film that actually, as far as like the narrative goes, happens much later in the film, and so on. I believe the Criterion Collection version of this movie, from what I read, has the film. I think it's. I'm not sure if it's two different versions of the film. I think it's the film as it's presented, and then they give an edited version where all the events are put in chronological order. So even though this is an early, like a very early Christopher Nolan film, you can kind of see how he some of the stuff that he still uses to make movies, but like with Memento, it's all out of order and stuff like that, and you can kind of see the potential that he had going for him at the time. So a lot of this kind of stuff is stuff that he still does in his films. This kind of gives you an idea of what he would be capable of with an actual like budget. I think this budget was a very small budget. I think it grossed around 200 something $1,000 in the theaters, but it definitely made a lot more than its budget. I think its budget was maybe $6,000 from what I was reading. And the reason they were able to keep that cost so low, Nolan likes to shoot on film. So if you're shooting on 16 millimeter film, which if you don't have a lot of money, you can go through film pretty quickly. So and then you aren't able to actually use any of that footage. So apparently, a lot of the scenes were rehearsed like over and over again to kind of limit the amount of film they would actually have to expose when they were actually like going through and like the editing process and all that. So they rehearse a bunch of the scenes, and then when they actually shot the scenes, they didn't have to go back in and do a ton of takes. because they had practiced the scene so much before that. With digital filmmaking, that isn't really a thing because you basically just erase what you don't want. You can just delete the files and all that. But when you're working with a very limited budget and spending a lot of that money on film and like processing and all that kind of stuff, you don't want to have a bunch of film that you basically bought and you can't use. So a lot of that was just well rehearsed, well in advance. So the woman he meets up is dating kind of like the owner of the bar, and he's kind of like this like local kingpin, like maybe small time gangster, but still pretty powerful. She starts hanging out with him, and at this point, you've noticed that he has like gotten a haircut, and he's shaved. So that's that. Again, back in this, the notes, it takes place out of order. One funny thing I did notice is they leave one apartment building, and there is a bat symbol on the door, like the kind of classic bat symbol that is like just Batman's logo. Just kind of funny that that was in there, as you know, Christopher Nolan in a few years from when this movie came out would be working on his own Batman trilogy. So I just thought that was a funny little Easter egg kind of thing. Basically, another thing that happens is they break into this woman's house that the guy eventually is talking to at this bar, and that's the scene that takes place out of order. So they break in, they misplace one of her earrings, they take an earring, and they leave it in a piano bench. So she thinks it got stolen, but it's been misplaced. They right after that scene, right after the scene where he's talking to her, it actually shows the robbery, or I think it was like they show the they she said that she got broken into, and then it shows the robbery that happened prior to that. So that kind of goes back to Nolan filming the events of the movie out of order. The lady's boyfriend, I think they just called him the bald man in this movie. In her apartment, kills a guy on this on like a carpet with a hammer, and then she kind of like rolls the carpet up, and so she's trying to get away from this guy. She's telling the main character that she's being blackmailed by him, and a bunch of other stuff. He kind of sets she sets him to go into the bald man's like office and steal something from a safe that is just photos of her that he's using to blackmail her. He goes in there, breaks into the safe, and the main character is kind of like learning all this other stuff from the other character who's like the thief. He goes in there with a hammer, gets into the safe, didn't bring a bag or anything with him, so he's trying to at one point take a bunch of he's trying to take all the stuff and kind of just like tape it to himself so he can get out of there. He eventually gets attacked by like a henchman of the bald man, and that guy gets killed with a hammer as well. So the main character kills that guy in the when he's trying to basically rob this guy. Yeah, so like Bill kills a man with a hammer, um, and Bill basically then kind of tells the blonde lady that he's doing all this stuff because he's trying to write a book about burglaring or like have characters that are doing that, so he's trying to use it for like ideas. The main twist, the big twist in the movie comes with the fact that the thief that is helping or working with the main character is actually like attempting to frame him or trying to frame him, and he is actually working with the blonde lady to do this. Um, so they kind of set up the main character to I believe like the thief kind of like witnessed a murder and was trying to not get caught. So he was basically he's gonna throw the main character basically to the wolves to kind of like take the fall for some of this stuff. Eventually, what happens then is he ends up kind of like being followed himself. So it's kind of like the follower becomes the followed, and it kind of like does this whole kind of thing, which is kind of interesting. And then in the end, it turns out that the thief is actually working with the bald man, which is her, like ex boyfriend kind of character that killed the guy in her apartment, and that he's also sent to kill her because she's trying to blackmail the bald man with that rug. She's like, "Hey, I got this rug," and it's not like a full carpet rug. It's like an area rug that she rolls. You see a scene where she's rolling it up, and you don't see what she does with it, but you see her pick it up and kind of roll it up. So apparently, she's holding this rug to blackmail him. He's trying to blackmail her with these photos, and the thief is then sent to basically take care of her. So he ends up killing the blonde lady, and then at the end of the film, you see the end of the film mirrors the beginning because in the beginning of the film, you see the main character giving an exposition of why he follows people to someone else, and it ends up being something that works with the police. So the final scene is, or actually not the final scene, like the next to last scene is the main character giving telling this police officer about all this stuff, and then the this police like investigator guy has all this stuff that basically links the main character to a bunch of other crimes and like break-ins and stuff like that. So the thief kind of basically plays the main guy. He goes by Bill in the movie. Forget exactly like what he was credited as. He calls himself Bill at one point, but basically he plays it off of him to make the main character take the fall for a bunch of other crimes, including the murder of the guy in the office as well as the murder of the blonde lady as well. And then the final scene is just the thief. There's like a voiceover. You see him in like a crowd of people, and then he disappears. So, really interesting film. Very short runtime, so I think like an hour and 10 minutes. So, probably because I think Nolan probably would have filmed more, had the film be longer if he had a bigger budget. Because Nolan films now are generally well above the 2 hour mark, depending on what the movie is. So some of his films can be like close to 3 hours, but you could definitely see kind of like the beginnings of his filmmaking style in this film. I believe after this came Memento. Was I think immediately after this, or maybe there was like maybe something in between that because I think it was Memento and then Insomnia and then into the Batman trilogy after that. But this was following again Christopher Nolan's first film. I think it has a 1998 date, but the copyright in the credits is 1999. I don't think a lot of the actors in this movie or actresses really went on to do much more after this. I think the police officer is played by one of Nolan's family members. Like I forget if it's like his uncle or something like that. And he's shown up in a few other Christopher Nolan films, such as the Batman films and all that. But a really interesting film. It kind of starts out slowly, and it does feel disjointed because it does take place out of order. Like some stuff you'll see a scene that will feed into another scene, like 20 minutes into like further into the film. I do want to get a hold of the Criterion Collection version to where it's all been compiled into a chronological film, and then watch that and to see how that looks. I think the way he filmed it though was really good, or the way he edited it was really good because you don't really see the twist with the thief and the lady basically trying to have the main character take the fall for their stuff. If you saw that early in the film, it may have made the story not work as well because you're kind of constantly trying to guess like who's trying to like who's trying to screw over who and that kind of thing. So again, that was Following by Christopher Nolan. It was available on archive.org as well as I believe it's on Amazon as well. I ended up watching it on archive.org. Again, it is presented in a 4:3 aspect ratio. Um, Really interesting film, so I would definitely recommend checking it out. I believe the next film in this series is Go. I have never seen Go. I think I saw a trailer for it like once back in like 1999. I think it was maybe like during like WW at the time, WWF or WCW, Raw or Nitro. I think I remember seeing the trailer once or twice there, and then didn't see the movie at all. Again, that I don't think Go ever came to a theater near me when I was living up in the mountains, so I'm gonna check that out. That's gonna be the next movie. You guys are or not recommended. You guys are welcome to watch along with me, and I'll be watching that movie within the next week, and then doing a video for that. After that, let me bring up the notes here I took on the other things. So best movie ever. So what we have now, so we did the Blair Witch Project. We just did Following. We have Go, and then we have Run Lola Run. After that, we have Office Space and The Matrix. Varsity Blues, She's All That, Cruel Intentions, 10 Things I Hate About You, which is actually coming to, I think Disney Plus is actually getting that when that launches. We have American Pie, Election, Rushmore, The Virgin Suicide, Star Wars Episode 1, Galaxy Quest, The Iron Giant, Eyes Wide Shut, and so on. I am almost actually done with the book. I think I have about like an hour and a half left in the audiobook, as well as you can see behind me, I have the book right over there as well for other if I want to read the physical copy. So again, Go is going to be our next film. I'll be doing that again within the next week or so. That's going to do it for now. As always, remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again for watching, and take care.